Hey, so this is just a very simple video, just talking about some of the matchups that I've been wanting to do, or ones that I might do in the future. So, all the matchups aren't really in any particular order of like ones that are more likely or ones that are less likely, but they are in order of the franchises that they're from. Starting off with the cartoons, we have my number one most favorite matchup of all time, being Finn and Jake versus Mordecai and Rigby, being Adventure Time versus Regular Show. I would imagine this battle being more to the death, however, having something at the end which either has them brought back, mainly due to the fact that both of them technically have ways of resurrecting themselves, or having the match be some kind of video game that they've both been playing. Something like that, as, yeah, a fight to the death would work better, but it still doesn't really fit the characters. The main reason I actually really like this fight is because I grew up watching both of these shows. They're pretty much my two most favorite shows of all time, and I really do like all four of the characters. I really like the match because of how interesting it is, with all the abilities and powers and strengths that both characters, both sides have, I guess in this case. Having all their abilities counter one another or overpower the other. It's just something I've been wanting to see for a while. With that being said, though, I'm pretty sure Mordecai and Rigby win. I've seen pretty much everything there is from both sides. I've read the comics, I have some of them. I've watched the TV shows, the specials, the commercials. I'm pretty sure, and I might be missing something, but I'm pretty sure Mordecai and Rigby are the winners in this battle. Next up is another regular show character, being Muscle Man versus Brody Fox. Brody Fox being from the Yo Mama YouTube channel. And in this case, I would probably consider this match to more be a composite of both characters, considering this is more of a joke fight, but also because there's so many different things that both characters have that mixing it all together into one big battle with both sides having everything they've got seems a bit more interesting, especially more for Brody Fox due to how many jokes and how many things he actually scales to. In this case, it is almost guaranteed that Brody wins this fight, even if you give Muscle Man, Mordecai, and Rigby scaling or give them their dimensional stuff. Brody Fox annihilates Muscle Man due to probably scaling to your mom and also to the fact that there are so many spin-offs and so many shows and so many things that the characters actually scale to directly. Another match I've been wanting to do for a while is Richard Watterson versus Captain Underpants. Richard being from The Amazing World of Gumball, and Captain Underpants being from Captain Underpants. This match, I would imagine using all the weird Toon Force that they both have. Captain Underpants has a bit less of it, but Richard does have a ton, which would be more outliers, but I feel for the match it makes sense to accept them for this kind of battle. The main reason I kind of like this fight is just because I really like how both of them kind of fit with each other. I know this match doesn't have a lot of connections, and a lot of the ones that I'm going to talk about sooner or later in this video are also in the same vein, having not too many connections, but being just ones that just I feel work well with each other. I don't really mind if certain matches don't have a lot of like connections or having the characters be super similar to one another. I just like some of the matches in certain cases, and this is one of them. With this one, it's a bit up in the air who wins, as Richard could scale to someone like Gumball, but also doesn't really scale to the rest of his family. But I'm pretty sure Captain Underpants still wins this battle. Next up, we have Dial H from DC Comics versus Ben 10 from, well, Ben 10. This match is one that I've actually been really wanting to do for a while, mainly because I kind of grew up watching Ben 10. So I thought of a matchup that would actually work well for the character. Dial H is a bit of an obscure character in DC Comics, but he works really well for Ben 10 in terms of matchup. This match is a bit more ambiguous who wins, as it really depends upon what you actually count for each character, and just by chance, as Dial H could be able to turn into some really powerful DC hero, or Ben 10 might be able to turn into Alien X. Next is a matchup that I actually really like, even though there is a much more popular match that one of the characters has, being Pink Panther versus Bugs Bunny. Pink Panther from, well, just Pink Panther, and Bugs Bunny from the Looney Tunes. This match won't be a death match if I were to do so. I kind of imagine this as more both of the characters interacting and kind of using their powers to try and one-up each other. Maybe like a bunch of shorts instead. This one, if I actually were to do it as a fight, obviously Bugs Bunny wins, but I feel it doesn't really fit the character as a one-on-one death match. It works better as just kind of an interaction between the two, as both characters are more renowned for that kind of conflict. The next fight I would want to actually do is Robbie Rotten versus Dastardly. Robbie Rotten from Lazy Town, and Dastardly from, I guess, Wacky Racers and Catch the Pigeon. This match, I do not know who wins. I haven't really watched both series in a really long time, but I grew up watching both series and I really like both characters, so it's a match that I've actually been pretty interested in doing at some point. Another match that I've been really wanting to do is Luce vs. Anne. So Luce from the Owl House and Anne from Amphibia. This match is pretty clear cut for Anne winning, but I really do like this match. It's a very popular matchup for obvious reasons, but it's one that only just recently, or I guess recently per se, considering when this video is coming out, but one that can actually be done properly, as originally when Anne was first given her more powerful form, the match was pretty clear cut on who wins. However, with Luce finally getting her Titan form, it means that the match can actually finally be done with a bit more of a ambiguous who wins. Although, considering that Luce doesn't really have any direct scaling other than the Collector, I'm pretty sure Anne wins. Now, this fight is actually one that I was actually planning on doing last time, but instead I did Bakugo versus Squidward. This match being Chowder versus SpongeBob. So Chowder from Chowder and SpongeBob from, well, SpongeBob. This match, if I were to have done as a battle, would be incredibly clear-cut, considering Chowder is far stronger than anything SpongeBob has ever done in a series. But I would actually do this match as more of a competition, maybe a cook-off between the two, where they're both using their Toon Force in order to try and get an upper hand against one another. This match is one that I might do, but it's a bit more ambiguous as there are a few other matches that I've been wanting to do a lot more for a lot longer. Another match that I've been wanting to do is Tom versus Augie. So Tom from Tom and Jerry and Augie from Augie and the Cockroaches. This match isn't the most popular for Tom, as I do know a lot of people like putting him up against Wile E. Coyote, but I already kind of have a Looney Tune character already on this list. Plus, I prefer Augie as a character, and I just really like his series. Honestly, this one is more just kind of a reason to go watch Augie and the Cockroaches and Tom and Jerry, just kind of fully. I don't know, I just really like both series, to the point where I kind of want to do a match between them, although I do know, considering how much material both characters have, it will be really hard to look through most of the stuff. So for this match, I would probably do like a certain set amount of seasons, or maybe just the first few seasons of Tom and maybe the first few seasons of Augie, just to be a bit more manageable of a fight. For this one, I don't fully know who wins. I would probably say Augie, but I'm pretty sure Tom has some really powerful stuff, including some crossovers. But it's still a bit up in the air, mainly also because of how many episodes both characters have. Another matchup that I've been really wanting to do for a while is Rick Sanchez versus Xavier. Rick from Rick and Morty and Xavier from Xavier Renegade Angel. This matchup is pretty obscure, as Xavier isn't really the most well-known character, but it's a matchup that I really like, mainly due to the fact that both characters are very different from one another. Yeah, their series are pretty weird, and the main connections come from the fact that their series are pretty similar, but the fact that both characters are really different but work well in a fight is the reason why I really want to do this match. This match is really weird to try and figure out a winner, as Xavier does have a lot more powerful things physically, but Rick has a lot more powerful technology. So it's a bit more ambiguous who wins this fight. Another match that I've been thinking of doing was actually Bunnicula versus Guk. Bunnicula from Bunnicula and Guk from Counterfeit Cat. These two franchises are pretty obscure, and I don't think there's anyone who has properly made this matchup before. But it's one that I've been pretty interested in actually doing, mainly because I really like searching and going through more obscure franchises. This match is almost completely one-sided though, as Guk does have a universal thing for some reason, but Bunnicula is pretty powerful, so there are a few abilities that he could use. This match I mainly kind of want to do due to the fact that I really like doing, as I mentioned, more obscure franchises, like the next one, being Future Worm versus Johnny Bravo. Johnny Bravo isn't really the most obscure character, but Future Worm is. Also, yeah, Johnny Bravo from Johnny Bravo and Future Worm from Future Worm. This match is pretty ambiguous who wins. I'm pretty sure Johnny Bravo wins, unless Future Worm has some really powerful thing that I'm forgetting. But I don't know. It's just a match that I think is actually really interesting. The next fights I'll be talking about are from TV shows. However, both of them are actually from the same franchise. These being Stain vs. Butcher, being My Hero Academia versus The Boys, and The Seven versus The Umbrella Academy. The Seven being from The Boys again, and The Umbrella Academy being from, well, The Umbrella Academy. Both of these matches are ones that I've been really wanting to do, mainly because I really like The Boys as a show, but I've already done a match with The Boys, with Titan vs. Homelander, so there's a lower probability that I'm going to do one of these matchups. Although The Seven versus The Umbrella Academy, out of the two, is probably the one that I'm most likely going to do. Butcher probably wins his match, and The Umbrella Academy destroys The Seven, mainly with that one moon thing and the ability to just travel through time. Next up, we have matchups for movie characters. Most of these movies will actually be ones that are animated, I think all of them actually are, rather than live-action movies. So, starting off the list, we have Maui versus Luisa. Maui from Moana and Luisa from Encanto. Now, this match is almost definitely one-sided. Maui destroys Luisa, but it's one that I've actually been thinking might be pretty interesting, as they're two characters that are very different to the ones that I've already animated, and would actually be a bit different to some of the other characters that I will do later on. So it's just a matchup that I find is a bit more interesting, and is a bit different from the rest. This next match is actually one that I'm probably going to do, mainly for a Christmas special or some kind of Christmas episode. That being Grinch versus Jack Skellington. The Grinch from The Grinch and Jack Skellington from Nightmare Before Christmas. This matchup is very well known, but it will be, again, very different from the rest of the episodes I normally do, mainly as like a special, but it still works, as I feel the way both characters will interact and how their abilities and powers will kind of work against each other will be pretty interesting. Also, I mainly want to do this fight because I really want to have a reason to draw a bunch of winter or Christmassy scenes, as I really like drawing the snow for some of those images. This match is, however, pretty clear-cut. The Grinch wins, mainly because of all of his magic abilities that he has outside of his main movie. But it's still a very interesting fight. Another 2v2 fight that I've been wanting to do is Hero and Baymax versus Hiccup and Toothless. Hero and Baymax from Big Hero 6, and Hiccup and Toothless from How to Train Your Dragons. This is also a pretty well-known matchup, but one that I'm a bit less inclined to do, mainly because I'm already going to do another 2v2 fight, mainly the first one I mentioned, but it's one that still sounds pretty interesting, and is one that I've been actually thinking of doing for a while now. But there is also another 2v2 fight that I've been thinking of doing, that being Legoshi and Haru versus Nick and Judy. This matchup is a bit more ambiguous, as it's a bit harder to figure out who wins depending on what you count for Judy and Legoshi, but it's one match that I've been actually really thinking of doing, mainly because of how interesting the fight would actually go down, mainly because of how different both franchises are, and how different it would be as a deathmatch. Another matchup that I've been wanting to do for a while, and one that has actually gotten a lot of traction recently, is Steve versus Emmett. Steve from Minecraft and Emmett from the Lego Movie. This match is really ambiguous, as it really depends on what you use for both characters, but it's one that's actually pretty interesting, considering how different both characters are, but how similar they are in some of their abilities and their skills. This match probably goes to Steve, depending on what you count, but there are arguments for Emmett. Now, this next matchup might be a bit of a weird one, but it's still one that I really want to do. That being Scrat versus Mort. Scrat from Ice Age and Mort from Madagascar. This matchup is a bit of a weird one, mainly because of how the characters are, but it's still pretty interesting, mainly because of the abilities that both characters have. It's pretty obvious who wins unless Mort has some kind of weird extra abilities that I'm unaware of, so I'm pretty sure Scrat wins this, but it will still be a fun episode to do. The next section is for anime characters. Now, while I've already used a couple anime characters in some of the matchups I've mentioned, these three will be more anime-specific episodes, so all the characters are from animes. So starting off, we have Rem versus Toru. Rem from ReZero and Toru from Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. This is a really odd fight, but it's still one that I really want to do. I like both characters, and I just find it would be pretty interesting to have them both interact. I'm pretty sure Toru wins, unless ReZero has some really weird power scaling. I haven't really watched the show in a while, so I don't know if there's anything really major that happens later on. Another match that I was actually thinking of doing last season, which I changed out for another character, was Kuro-sensei versus Monokuma. Kuro-sensei from Assassination Classroom and Monokuma from Danganronpa. I haven't fully watched Danganronpa yet, but from what I've started and from what I've seen, it seems to be a pretty interesting series, and Kuro-sensei seems to work well as a character for him for a matchup. This matchup I'll probably not do anytime soon, mainly due to the fact that I've already done Kuro-sensei pretty recently. Well, recently as in last year. This next match is a bit of an obscure one, but it's still one that I really want to do, mainly because I really like both series. That being Yuki versus Sota. Yuki from Future Diary versus Sota from If Her Flag Breaks. This is a pretty obscure match, mainly because of Sota, but also because Yuki isn't really that well used in verses, mainly because Yuno is the main kind of character that everyone uses for verses and matchups. But it's still a matchup that actually works well, with a lot of connections between the two characters, with mainly connections that actually work well for a fight. I'll probably do a Future Diary matchup before this, probably with Yuno, but I still don't really have a proper matchup for her, so until I find one, this is probably the one I would do if I were to do a Future Diary match. The next section is video game matchups, with all three of them actually being video game versus video game matches, which I wasn't really intending, but it just kind of turned out this way. So starting off the list, we have one of my most favorite matchups, being Red versus Pea Shooter. Red from Angry Birds and Shooter from Plants vs. Zombies. This match is a bit of a weird one, as if I were to do it, I'd probably actually composite both characters, which is something I don't really like to do, but this matchup really works well in doing so, as Red works well with all of his other more wacky abilities, and Pea Shooter with all of his variants all kind of added together. With that being said, I'll probably say Pea Shooter wins, even though Red has a lot of crossovers, There are a few versions of Pea Shooter which are incredibly powerful. Another match that I've been wanting to do, which has a very obscure franchise connected to it, is Temmie vs. Momotype. Temmie from Undertale and Momotype from Momotype. This matchup is the most obscure on this list, mainly for the fact that Momotype is an incredibly obscure franchise, one that I really doubt almost anyone watching knows. But it's still a really good game, and one that actually has a really good matchup with it. Temmie and Momotype do work well in a fight, even though it's pretty one-sided, considering Temmie has some weird abilities that probably take a win, although I'm still not sure. Either way, it's still a matchup that I've been really wanting to do, and would actually bring to light a very good franchise to a lot more people. Another Undertale match that I've been wanting to do is Gaster vs. G-Man. Gaster from Undertale and G-Man from Half-Life. This match is a bit more of a silly one, mainly for the fact that both characters have barely anything in terms of stats or abilities. But I feel that's just a really interesting idea, a matchup where there's barely any information to go off of for both characters. I don't fully know if it'll work or not, but it's something I might try at some point. Now, this last section will actually be for internet battles, being characters who originally started from the internet. So, characters who are from YouTube series or internet archives or articles will be put into this section. So, starting off this section, we start off with my second most favorite matchup, being SCP-682 versus Doomsday. This matchup is one of my favorites, mainly because of SCP-682, as I really like the SCP Foundation as a franchise, and I want to do some matchups with it. I've already done one matchup with the franchise, but I do want to do another with a proper, more well-known matchup. In this case, I'll probably say SCP-682 wins, although I'm unsure because Doomsday does have a lot of really powerful stuff if you count everything for both characters. But if I do that, then I'm pretty sure SCP-682 wins, but it's a bit more ambiguous. The next match is also one of my most wanted matchups, being Dr. Manhattan versus Nixon. Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen and Nixon from the Nixonverse / Monument Mythos. This match, I'll probably go for the Watchmen version of Dr. Manhattan rather than the DC Comics version, just to have it be a bit more of a fair fight. This match will be done very differently to most of my other fights, as it seems to work a lot better as more of an interaction with the two characters rather than an actual fight, mainly for the fact that both characters don't really fight in their series, but more talk with one another, if that makes sense. Although, considering how powerful both characters are, their words or their abilities or just their dialogue will have like crazy effects on the world around them. So of this match, it will be done very differently to how most of my matchups will be done, but it's still one that I want to do. The last matchup I want to talk about is Speedrunner Mario versus Mucky. Speedrunner Mario from Something Versus and Mucky from The Mucky Show. This match is also another joke fight, but it's still one that I find is actually really interesting. I really like the idea of actually having it be done in two different languages, with Speedrunner Mario actually talking entirely in Japanese and Mucky only talking in Spanish. Just the idea of the two characters interacting would be really interesting to do. And I've actually figured out how to draw in both of their art styles, so it would actually be pretty interesting to try and do an animation for.
So yeah, that's about it. If there's any fights that you want to see specifically, then comment them down below.